Hello, Virgo. Something already changed. You just haven't found the words for it yet. Okay. If you found this tonight, don't move. Not yet. Because what's sitting in this space isn't something to be consumed quickly and forgotten. It's something to be felt slowly in the particular way that only things that matter deserve to be felt. Let everything else wait just for a moment, just for this. So, something cracked open in the architecture of your ordinary life, and you felt it before you understood it. Not in a dramatic way, not with the violence of something breaking, but with the particular, almost imperceptible sound of something that had been sealed for a very long time, finally giving way. A hairline fracture in the wall between the life you'd been living and the life that had been waiting, patient and silent and entirely certain of itself, just on the other side. And now you're standing in the space between the two, not fully in either. That in between place has a specific texture, you may recognize it. It feels like standing in a doorway in the middle of the night, when the room behind you is familiar and the room ahead is dark, and something in you knows, without being able to explain how it knows, that going back is no longer the same option it was before you reached the threshold. Let me tell you about what happens when a person meets their match, not in the way that phrase is casually used, not as a cliche, but in its original and more unsettling meaning. To meet your match is not simply to meet someone who is good for you, or compatible with you, or pleasant to be around. It is to meet something that reflects you back to yourself with a clarity that the softer, more comfortable mirrors in your life never offered. And that reflection, precise, unflinching, impossible to look away from, does something to a person. It rearranges them quietly from the inside. It reaches past the version they'd been presenting and makes contact with the version that had been waiting underneath it. This reflection invites you to consider what specifically shifted inside you, not around you, but inside the private and unobserved landscape of your own interior in the moment you first understood that this was different from everything that came before it, because the difference is felt before it is understood. It lives in the body before it arrives in the mind, in a specific quality of attention, in a stillness that appears where there used to be noise, in the particular way time moves differently in certain presences. Some encounters accelerate time, fill it with stimulation and momentum and the urgent sensation of something happening. And then there is the other kind, the encounter that slows time, that creates in its wake a silence that isn't empty but dense, weighted with something that hasn't yet been named, pressing gently against the walls of the ordinary, asking to be acknowledged. Picture a compass that has spent years pointing in directions that felt almost right, close enough to follow, not close enough to trust completely. Always a slight deviation from true north. A persistent, low-grade sense that the direction was approximately correct, but that something essential was slightly off in a way that was difficult to articulate and easier to ignore. And then, without announcement, without ceremony, the needle stops its restless deviation and settles fully, completely, with the particular stillness of something that has finally found the thing it was designed to locate. You may know that stillness. You may be sitting inside it right now, uncertain whether to trust it, uncertain whether what you're feeling is real or is simply the very convincing illusion of something real, constructed by a mind that has been waiting long enough to start seeing what it hopes for rather than what is actually there. This reflection invites you to consider, what is the difference in your body between the stillness of something that is finally right and the stillness of something that has simply gone quiet? And do you trust yourself, after everything, to know the difference? Some of you watching this have a complicated relationship with your own perception. Not because your perception is unreliable, it is, in fact, extraordinarily precise, but because it has been overridden at key moments by the louder voices of need or loneliness, or the particular desperation of someone who wanted something to be true badly enough to temporarily suspend the part of themselves that knew better. And those experiences, however understandable, however human, have left a residue. A layer of doubt applied over the instrument of your own knowing, making it harder to trust what you feel when you feel it, even when what you feel is completely accurate. But here is what meeting your match does to that layer of doubt. It doesn't argue with it, it doesn't reassure it or reason it away, or perform in ways specifically designed to address it. It simply exists, with a consistency and a quality that the doubt, however persistent, cannot entirely explain away. Because the doubt is practiced at explaining things away, it has years of experience doing exactly that. But it is not practiced at sustaining its argument against something that keeps quietly and without effort being exactly what it appears to be. This reflection invites you to consider, where has the doubt been loudest in this particular situation? And is it possible that the doubt is not responding to evidence, but to the sheer unfamiliarity of something that doesn't require you to brace for impact? Because that is perhaps the most disorienting thing about meeting your match: the absence of the familiar dread, the particular silence where the anxiety usually lives. You've become so accustomed to the background noise of uncertainty in connection, the constant low frequency monitoring of temperature and tone and the distance between what someone says and what they mean, that its absence feels strange, almost suspicious, as though the quiet itself is a warning rather than simply the sound of something that doesn't need to be anxious because it doesn't need to pretend. Something about this connection doesn't perform, doesn't chase and retreat in the calculated rhythms of someone managing distance as a form of control, doesn't leave you parsing silence for hidden meaning or reading between lines that were always deliberately ambiguous. It is instead unusually, almost disarmingly legible. And legibility, for someone who has spent significant time in the fog of connections that were never quite clear, can feel almost too simple, almost too still, almost too much like solid ground when solid ground has been the exception rather than the rule. Let me tell you something about the life that exists on the other side of meeting your match. Not as a promises are not what this is, but as a possibility worth sitting with in the specific way that only possibilities you've almost stopped believing in deserve to be considered. The life on the other side is not unrecognizable. It is not a complete departure from everything you've built, everything you've become, everything you've survived and integrated and turned into the particular person you currently are. It is instead that life and your life, but with something added that you didn't know was missing until its presence made the absence retroactively obvious. A quality of ease, not the ease of things being simple. Nothing genuinely significant is simple, but the ease of things being honest, of not spending energy in the management of presentation, of being able to set down, slowly and without drama, the particular exhaustion of performing a version of yourself that was always slightly less than the actual one, because the actual one felt like too much to risk offering to someone who might not be able to hold it. Your match can hold it. Not because they are perfect. The concept of perfect is not what we're working with here, but because something in the specific construction of who they are meets something in the specific construction of who you are, and the meeting doesn't create friction so much as it creates recognition. The particular, almost startling recognition of two things that were designed independently to fit together, and that fit when they finally make contact with a rightness that needs no explanation and produces no argument. This reflection invites you to consider what version of yourself, not the managed version, not the protected version, but the full and unedited and completely inhabited version, has been waiting for exactly this kind of recognition. And what would it feel like to finally let that version be seen? The power is yours. It always has been. Not the power to control what this becomes, or to guarantee the trajectory of something still in its early, tender, unfinished state, but the power to be present for it fully, without the familiar retreat into self-protection that has kept you safe and also, at times, kept you slightly apart from the very things you most wanted to be close to. Your life will never be the same after this, not eventually. Already, in the specific way you've been carrying yourself differently since this presence entered your orbit, in the questions you've been asking yourself in the quiet hours, in the particular quality of attention you've been giving to something you're not yet sure how to name, but can no longer pretend not to feel. Trust yourself with this. The recognition you're feeling isn't imagination. It isn't wishful thinking dressed in the clothes of intuition. It is your own deepest instrument of navigation, finally, pointing somewhere that feels in the specific and unmistakable way that true things feel like the direction you were always meant to go. Before you go, I want to hear from you in the comments. What does it feel like in your body when you're in the presence of someone who genuinely meets you, not the version you present, but the version you actually are? And has there been a moment, recently or long ago, where you felt your life shift in a direction you hadn't planned for, and recognized, even in the disorientation of it, that the shift was right? Drop it below. I read every single one, and nothing shared here goes unwitnessed. See you in the next one, and listen. Meeting your match doesn't always feel like winning. Sometimes it feels like finally stopping running and finding out that what you were running toward was the thing you were running from all along. Take care.